Welcome, everyone. This is Pastor Bob, and time for our midweek message. And today I hope to have an interesting message. And if you'll notice during the sermon series, we're talking about giving up certain things. And last week we talked about giving up enemies. And during the midweek messages, I'm trying to go the more devotional angle and talk about things we ought to be doing. Last week I talked a bit about loving people and practicing love and what that could look like. Today I would encourage you to start reading the Bible. Studies have shown, and this is not my opinion, this is data from multiple sources, that the majority of Christians today, including those who attend church and practice their faith, have not read the Bible. And of those who have read the Bible, they've read it maybe once and continue reading it maybe once or twice per year. So I'm hoping today to encourage you to dig in a little bit as a practice for Lent, and hopefully that will become a regular practice. So let's talk about what the Bible is and maybe where to start. Now, there are two options or categories of options with Bibles. The big question I get is which one? So let's talk about the first category, which Bible? Well, as Methodists, we're part of the Protestant Reformation. We use a Bible that has 66 books that you can find in almost every bookstore, website, just about anywhere. Now, there's also a Catholic Bible. A Catholic Bible has a few more books than the Protestant Bible. Why is that? Well, because during the Protestant Reformation, the Protestant leaders rejected some of the Old Testament books that were written in Greek and kept only ones written in Hebrew. Now, how do you identify a Catholic Bible? Well, I actually have one right here. This is a annotated study Bible, and I don't know if you can see it, but right here along the bottom it says includes the Apocrypha. So it's got a few more books in there that the Protestant Bible doesn't have, like 1st and 2nd Maccabees, Tobit, Sirach, Dragon, stuff like that. Now, there's also an Eastern Orthodox Bible that has 3 or 4 more books, and then an Ethiopian Bible, which has a couple more books and a bit of the early church, the apostolic early church local to Ethiopia. And there's a few other variants out there. But most of the Bibles you're going to find here in America are going to be the Protestant Bible, which includes the 66 books, the Old Testament in Hebrew, New Testament in primarily Greek, or the Catholic Bible, which I just showed you. It normally says at the bottom, includes Apocrypha. Now, then the next question is, and this is the second category, which translation? Because translators don't agree on how to put it into English. And that's for many reasons. There are words in the Greek and the Hebrew that don't really translate to English very well. So they have to make a lot of assumptions or try to phrase it in a way where they can capture the meaning of the Greek word by using a collection of English words. There are also many places where scholars don't agree on what the words actually mean. That's where many of our debates come from, is because we're not quite sure what the intention of the original author was using that set of words, and then how do we apply that today? But most people, when they're reading the Bible, they're not getting into all the technical details, and nor should you. It's not really that important. What most people are looking for is either readability or accuracy of translation. So if you're looking for something that's readable, the Common English Bible is a really good one, and doesn't really come to the translation with an agenda. Yes, some translators come with an a priori set of convictions that they apply to the text and use when they are translating it. So the CEB is a pretty neutral Bible, and it has pretty good accuracy, but it's made for ease of reading. Now, some people want something truest to the Greek, even if it's a little harder to read. The NRSV or NASB or NRSV, either of those two Bibles are good. They tend to hold closer to the Greek, but you'll notice as you're reading, it doesn't flow as much because it just doesn't translate as well into, let's say, contemporary English. So to remain true to the Greek, they have to sacrifice some of the flow and readability. Another good Bible, which is super popular in America, but comes from a more evangelical Protestant perspective, is the NIV. A lot of people use that one. I don't see any problem with it, unless you're a scholar and can pick out the areas where there is some contention between other translators. It's not really going to matter. It's a pretty good all-around Bible, and the scholars, I think, have done a good job trying to be faithful to the text, and where there's questions, they footnote it. And when there's issues with the text, or there's a part that maybe was included in some early manuscripts but not others, they note that, and they do a pretty good job about that. So, but my thing would be, regardless of the translation, that you start reading it to become informed. A lot of Christians today, will make political opinions or assumptions or ideas for their life, and assuming that's a Christian position, but they don't know. They've never read the Bible, much less studied it. So really, they're asserting an opinion from ignorance. But that's not the real reason why we read the Bible. The Bible is God's revelation to us. It's not the only revelation. God reveals himself in many ways, but it's a primary one. And it's how we learn about who God is, what it means to follow Jesus, what it means to love our neighbor. It gives us the history of the Hebrew people, and gives us the entire picture of God's plan for salvation of not only us individually, but the whole world. It tells us about God's plan for his kingdom and building that kingdom and what that kingdom should look like. It tells us, how we should do things like practical things like marriage or finances or money. It's 66 different books, again, speaking of the Protestant Bible, of all kinds of different literature, from love poems like the Song of Solomon, to ancient legal codes like Leviticus, to history and a succession of different monarchies and kings. There's the prophetic literature like Isaiah and Ezekiel. And then, of course, and this is the best place to start, I think, for most people starting to read the Bible, the New Testament. Start with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Right there, if you don't read anything else, let's say you're busy or you're not interested or you just don't like reading, whatever the reason might be. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That's 4 portraits of Jesus' life, teaching, and ministry. If you don't read anything else, if you just read those and put those into practice, you would be doing very well. Now, after Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you have Acts, which is the early church. And then you have the epistles, which is letters back and forth to the early church, usually explaining things and correcting problems. And then, of course, at the end is Revelation, which many scholars and pastors and theologians debate exactly what that is and what that means. That's a subject for another time. But Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, dig into those. Of the 4, I think my favorite data-wise would be Luke, because he was a physician who was not an eyewitness, but was more of like an investigator trying to figure out what's going on. Evidently, he was commissioned by someone named Theophilus. It's right in the first chapter, if you'll take a look. And he's trying to put together all the data and put together an accurate portrayal of Jesus' life, ministry, death, and resurrection. If you're looking for something a little more spiritual, I like John. John is very different than the other 3, and he comes at it from a whole different angle. But my hope to you is pick a good translation, read through a few, find one that's easy to read for you, and then start with the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Just go with those. Beautiful books. I think what you'll find is you'll get hooked. I think you'll find that you learn a lot. I think you'll find a lot of the assumptions you had about what it means to be a Christian or a follower of Jesus might be challenged, because the contemporary, let's say, pop theology of what it means to follow Jesus and what the Bible says are 2 very different things. Then if you get hooked, then you're going to start wanting to read the letters, and then you're going to start digging in more, and I hope that happens to you. Maybe it won't, but if you at least start reading, that would be great. My last point, and the whole purpose of the Bible, is to learn who God is and to be closer to God. I mean, just think about it for a second. Think about your relationships. The deeper your relationships go, are usually a result because you know more of each other. Your relationship when you first start dating is nowhere, assuming your relationship's healthy and things are going as they should, Your relationship should be a lot deeper after 10 years than on day one. Again, assuming your relationship's healthy and things are going as they should. Same process goes with our relationship with God. The more we learn and know about God, the more we learn what His will is for our lives, the more we know about His plan for the world and heaven and hell and salvation and the kingdom, the more we become better and deeper in our relationship with Him. The Bible is the primary tool, a gift, a sacred obligation given to us, and not the only one, but the primary one, in which we draw closer to God. And I would say that it'd be challenging to really have a deep and full relationship with God. I mean, how can you have a relationship with someone you don't know? You see what I'm saying? So I'd encourage you to start digging in now. You can get most Bibles free online. A lot of good free websites and websites that have even biblical tools to help you understand some of the more challenging areas. But if you want paper, plenty of good paper ones out there. You can find a Bible just about anywhere. Year after year after year, it continues to be one of the number one selling books in the world. So trust me, they're not hard to find. Matter of fact, I'm sitting in a library here. We're kind of deciding what to do with it, but it's filled with Bibles and Christian books. So you could come down and grab one yourself right here, free, right in your own neighborhood. All right. Great practice for Lent. Let's start reading our Bibles. Thanks.